Seraph Snow. The Seraph deck utilizes the Prism mechanic, where it takes away your opponent's rear guards from either rear guard circle, drop zone, or hand. The goal of this deck is to take away their resources so they're inclined to use CB or Soul to get them back. This makes certain decks have a difficult time being able to do their winning images, any other place that they try to focus on, while you're getting some benefits depending on the number of prisoned units. For example, we get benefits if we have 1, 2 to 3 in most cases. But the biggest thing that we want to accomplish is hitting 10 in the prison. With Pureligh's skill, not only giving 5k for every 2 cards in prison, once you reach the 10, your entire front row gets a passive extra crit. This with Citrus and Aqua applying very good pressure and being lethal even while your opponent's at 4 damage. Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. They're great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase. Starting out with the red line, we have the anti-sorted that you want to play. You need 1 Kyanite blue to search for the Galactus card, so that way you can start prisoning units moving forward. Rosette pink is useful on turn 2 to start enabling prison effects and make it annoying for your opponent already to choose a card from their hand to get prisoned. Your Seraph Snow turn is actually not bad. You'll be able to get triple drive assuming you have 3 in the prison with the additional 10k power up as well. And it has the additional skill where you can counterblast 1 to prison 2 of your opponent's rear guards. This helps actually build up to that number much more easier. If you do play cards like Forbidal, for example, you can actually revive this if you soul blasted it later on onto rear guard circle, because its skill to prison units also works on rear guard circle. Also, quick plug, if you haven't gotten your bundles for the next set, check out 50 Card Shop and also the other retailers. This will help you save a little bit of money too on the next set of support. Any support helps to the channel as well. For the main deck, we are playing 3 copies of Purelight. So you only need 3 because you have a card such as like Security Upgrader being able to superior ride this from deck or drop or even hand. Once this card is placed onto Vanguard Circle, you can CB1 and Soul Blast 1 with Seraph in the name. And then your opponent chooses 2 in Soul, 2 in the rear guard circle, and 2 in their hand and prisons those units. So you can see you can have a maximum of 6 cards being prisoned just right off the back. Your opponent will try to play over this by emptying their soul or even emptying their fields too. So do expect that when it comes to those matchups too. The phenomenal continuous skill is that for every 2 cards, your front row gets a passive 5k. And again, once you hit that 10, you'll get the additional crit for your entire front row. This can be taken advantage of cards like such as Aquas, where it has the extra guard restriction, and also Citrus, where they're restanders essentially. And also don't forget it has triple drive as well. We're playing 3 Aqua, so this is a phenomenal card because it has that 2 or more restriction. It also gets power and it's shield when there's 2 or more in the prisons. This is 10k shield fodder essentially when you need it, but ideally you want to place this because it also prisons a card from their drop zone of their choosing. 1 Bracing Angel Ladder. In this metagame, we have things that touch your riggards and also removal. A big one is Shiranui, for example, where it takes your units and dominates them. This can help deal with that a little bit better too. This also generates soul for you once you get to your turn 3. It's also like an upstart goblin at that point. Your soul will be used with cards such as like Muna to be able to draw as many cards as you can. We're playing 4 copies of Citrus. This is a phenomenal card because when your Vanguard attacks, that's a Seraph grade 3 or greater. If 3 or more, it gets 10k. If there's 5 or more, you can actually CB1 to restand this unit. So essentially, you're able to get 5 attacks with Seraph, especially if you use the Purelight skill to give you crit into your entire front row. You literally have 5 attacks that are crit too. The power gain is so much appreciated too because now you're able to hit even bigger numbers with the power up from Seraph Purelight as well, making it very difficult for your opponent to guard these attacks. The on-place effect is really good early game as well because you could just play Slit and your opponent has to prison a card from their drop zone, and then you can Energy Blast Tree to draw a card. So this card can start building up not only the prison but also your advantage to start calling other cards or even get into your pieces for the following turn. 3 Cup Spring, so we need ways to continually prison cards that are pretty free, essentially. You don't have to worry about Soul and Counterblast, and Cup Spring is perfect. Not only that, but it prisons there from their hand. So it makes it inconvenient at times where your opponent has to like prison certain key cards that they want to keep in hand. And then the random draw, they don't know what they actually get. Sometimes it is advantageous for them because they could just throw away a card they don't really need. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, your goal is to hit those numbers that are being prisoned. It's also worth noting that cards like Cup Spring and also Aquas and Citrus, for example, they're just on place as well. We have a card like Lifeful that actually superior calls from the deck, and so these will still trigger. So a card like Makurai wouldn't work with a card like Lifeful, for example. For some defensive options, we're playing 2 copies of Violet, so this is basically a PG for any grade 2 or less units that are attacking you, assuming that your opponent has at least 1 in the prison, which in most cases it's doable. You realize as you play this deck, not only you need your combo pieces, but you also need some shield value cards in your hand to to be able to survive. Sometimes you have grindy games where you're kind of going back and forth stealing resources and also trying to reach to the 10, and they keep pulling those prison units out and you're like having a tough time. Sometimes you end up with like 8 or 9. So a game can drag out, and so having additional shield value helps a lot with this deck. Another card to help with the shield value is Melting Heart. This is more of a blitz order type of deal. Depending on how many prison units you have, the attacking unit loses 5k for each prison unit. Do be mindful of this card because it does choose, so if there's any like restrictions such as like Bracing Angel Ladder, if you're trying to do this on a rearguard attack, or maybe like a Ursula behind the Vanguard kind of deal, this card can have limited use, so just be careful of that. You could also play the Banana King card, like it just looks like a banana. But this card, in tandem with the other set order, you can basically set up more shield value that way. Of course, that'll be from the field itself. The other option also to build further more advantage or recovery is the Dual Clanation card. That card lets you actually call cards from the top of the deck and help rebuild the field if needed to. And also dig deeper a little bit with combo pieces too. Now for the grade 1s. The grade 1s are really important for this deck, and you'll realize why. One of them is Security Upgrader, so essentially it has an axe skill. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Seraph in the name and you did not ride this turn, you're able to retire this unit, prison opponent's card from the drop zone, but also Superior Ride Pure Light from deck, hand, or drop. Furthermore, the ability of that Seraph Pure Light's skill is reduced by 1 Counterblast. So if you are able to do this to get Pure Light onto the Vanguard Circle, literally would just Soul Blast 1 Seraph card to be able to prison 6 cards, essentially. So ideally, you actually want to use this card over manually writing Seraph Pure Light when the time comes on your turn 4. So that's why I also play 4, because you can keep using this card for like future Pure Lights as well too. So it just specifies if your Vanguard's already grade 3 or more with Seraph and it hasn't ridden this turn. What's also really nice too, if you're still in the grade 3 Seraph, just before you do this, since it's an add skill, it's during the main phase. You're able to get away with using the grade 3 Seraph's Counterblast skill to prison cards if you need to add more to the prison count before you do Pure Light. So this is very useful, especially if the opponent has like a massive field, essentially. We're playing 4 copies of Munna. This card is very important for the deck too, because it also becomes a 13k booster, so any 10k grade 2s make that 23k line, any plus as well from there. But it also gets kind of like a resist-like effect once your opponent has 3 in the prison too, so it makes it like make it harder to remove your stuff too later on. And then what's really annoying about this card for your opponent is that once they get cards out of the prison, if this sees that, you can Soul Blast 1 to draw a card, and it's once per turn, so it's not super broken. So if you have 2 of these on the board, for example, you can Soul Blast 2 for 1 of each and draw 2 cards. If you have 3, you did Soul Blast 3, and then for 1 of each, you draw 3 cards, essentially. This is your way to continually have advantage in your hand so you can still survive until you get to your winning image. In worst case scenario, if you have like barely any field, this can go up and move up to the front row, and it'll be a 13k attacker, and then with any power up, you make some really good numbers that way too. Worst case scenario. As you may notice, you could actually call all the grade 1s early on for boosters, essentially, too. The same thing with Lifel, too, and then they still get their benefits when you need to use them, essentially. Lifel is no exception, too. She also becomes a 13k attacker or booster, but her skill is an act where you can CB1, prison one of your opponent's rearguards. You can choose as well, whether it be front or back, and you check the top 5 and call a card that is a grade equal or less to your current Vanguard. So you can see right off the back, this prisons and calls cards, and then again, with your grade 2s, you're able to continually prison more cards, depending if you get cards like Citrus, Aquas, or even Cuff Spring, for example. You could also use this later on if it's still on the board to like recover field, essentially. This is almost like the same fulfillment of the grade 2 that I mentioned earlier, if you want to play that too. I'll in tandem with this card too. This card can also call itself, so if you have extra CB, you can chain another one, and you just +1 again as well. 3 PGs, we actually have access to Sanctitude, the other version of it. This is really good against like Luar, for example, with Drag Strider, especially if you're expecting like Stride decks that have the additional crest, so this becomes free as well. So just a slightly different condition, but now Seraph can actually use this card. If you tried the other Elementario Sanctitude, you actually would not be able to use it because your Vanguard's grade 4. It has to be a grade 3 Vanguard for that one. And of course the one Galactus, because you need to prison units in the first play. You don't need to play more copies too. It's not worth it. If you do end up hard drawing into this card, it is kind of like a -1 in a sense too, because you could have like just plus from the search, but that doesn't happen as often, and so you just have to play that out as is. That's why even cards like Munna is super important for these scenarios too, to recover some hand size. Now for the triggers, we are playing 8 crit first with the effect crits. So sometimes you do need the extra soul, and sometimes you need to call a booster. This can help with just getting the best of the 2 worlds. You could also call these as 5k boosters, well, for the vanilla crits essentially. You just want to make sure you have 8 crit just to have that pressure too. You may not be as aggressive in terms of like, you may think because like Pure Light gives you the extra crit, do you really need all these crits? One, it takes work to get to that, especially if you're playing against somebody that knows what they're doing against the deck. But 2, it also makes your deck very scary on turn 3 because you have triple drive with the Grade 3 Seraph. This in tandem with the Brand Gate OT will make it like very scary because you can automatically just go crit 4 just like that. If you did some damage to now plays too, you can help close the gap a lot more easily with crits too for future attacks. As mentioned, we play the Brand Gate OT, so this is really nutty because that was the power, that was the crit on your front row. This will time can end games too. You could try playing the other like generic OTs too. You're more than welcome to, but I feel like this card is still really good in this deck. So this is different too. I still play 3 draws. So what I noticed about this deck is still a combo piece. If you don't have the right cards, this deck is slow. It can brick essentially. And if you're playing behind already with this deck and it doesn't generate advantage until you have Munas triggering as well, or even Citruses, and you still need cards that are getting prisoned or are prismed already to even generate advantage from that too. So this helps with the early game so you can survive and also like get more pieces to make it a more impactful turn for you. Even the mid game, since you have triple drive, you more likely hit this too, which gives you an extra card. And so you see 4 new cards that way too. And I just found it valuable just being able to draw into an extra card. The front trigger is still good. It's 20k shield as well, so it's a good option still. It's just that, you know, once you hit that 10 or more, if you need all that power with the additional front for just that end game, that's fine too if you value that more. I just value overall consistency for this deck. And 4 heals, so you can play any effect triggers, it just depends on the metagame too. With the other cards that have help defensive stuff, this just having the 4 15ks is pretty consistent on just having that shield value. If you do feel like you're finding a lot of like specific cards, like a bunch of short noise, you can play like 1 or 2 of the cards that gets power on restanders essentially. And that's the deck profile. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a really fun deck to play out. I definitely recommend for people that want to have some kind of a like controlling aspect to their gameplay. This is a lot more fair than it was like with Link Joker back in the day for those who have been around long. And what's nice is that over the years, they revamped it and gave it extra stuff like having some like 2 or more guard restrictions or even restanders. So it doesn't become boring to play. So it has a little bit of everything that you want to do, even Superior Calling, for example. And if you're interested in what's upcoming in Standard later on with the Night Rose deck set, you can check out the deck profile I just recently made as well, whether you're playing it or plan to face it eventually too. On to the next one, amigos. Bye!